Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's the city's chief financial officer. He's a trustee of New York's pension funds totaling way more than $150 billion. He can investigate all matters affecting the city and audit the performance and finances of all city agencies, as well as the city itself. He must certify the city's budget, and also he happens to be the most popular New York City official, and he's got subpoena power. He's Scott Stringer, the controller of the city of New York. Scott was elected controller in November 2013, and prior to that, from 2010 to 2014, served as Manhattan Borough President, and before that, he served 13 years in the State Assembly. Welcome back, Mr. Controller.
It is great to be back on
your show. It is totally a pleasure. Okay, before we talk money, budgets, pensions, bond sales, let's briefly touch on another kind of money. Dirty, corrupting money. You were in Albany for 13 years. You're sitting here. What are you seeing in Albany with all of these arrests and indictments and charges, etc.?
Well, I think it's become clear that one should not steal from the public. And if you do, you're going to be punished and you're going to go to jail and lose everything you have. And that is the lesson that Preet Bharara is sending. That is the lesson voters are now sending. And people have had enough. And I think that with the now selection of Carl Heastie as Speaker, there will be a new generation of elected officials who have sort of been kept down in the Assembly. They will emerge, and I'm very confident that there's a lot of talent in the Assembly and that we can do some great things again.
Really?
I am.
You're truly optimistic.
I am going to take the glass half full because I do think that we have to encourage our legislators to look at the issues that face the state. They're very complicated issues. You obviously have had a lot of dysfunction over time, but we also have to usher in a new generation. And I've talked to a lot of these young Assembly members. They want to work on issues related to women and minority-owned businesses, making sure New York City gets its fair share. You talk to the city members, and you talk about the hope that people have around the state. It's not just New York City, but when you bridge upstate and downstate and the suburbs, you bring everybody together, you can do some great things. When I was in the Assembly, I participated in some of the most important issues facing people. The debate on the death penalty, getting rid of the death penalty, and the whole issue of marriage equality. These were issues. I remember being one of 5 sponsors of the marriage equality bill, thinking, wow, this is going to take decades. And look what happened when the legislature and a governor came together and said, let's do this now and change the discussion around the country. So good things can happen.
Okay. Staying in Albany just for a moment, you served...
Not too long.
Right. No, we're going to move off this. Served under Shelley Silver, but you were one of the first officials calling for him to resign. That must have been a tough call, but in another sense, not a tough call.
Look, it was time to recognize that this had run its course, that we had to turn the page. I have a lot of respect for Speaker Silver, and I hope that people view him innocent until proven otherwise. That's our justice system, and I don't think anyone should besmirch that. But I think it was time for change. We needed a new speaker. We needed new leadership, and I think we need to open up Albany. We need to give people an opportunity to legislate. We need individual legislators to be empowered, and I'm very hopeful by what Carl Heastie is saying, giving new members the opportunity to lead and to make sure that people have an opportunity to have a voice so that their districts can be empowered.
It's one of these tune in and we'll see. Right. Okay, let's talk about money. Let's talk about the New York City economy and budget. We're in pretty good shape. Your reports seem to suggest that pretty good.
Look, we've got strong job growth. We have a very hot economy in a lot of our sectors: real estate, banking, the insurance industry. We just put out a quarterly report indicating that our finances are sound. I applaud the mayor for his preliminary budget, which is really an outline of what.
Yeah, well, I want to get into that just a bit.
But basically, the mayor is taking a cautious approach, even though our economy seems to be much more manageable. We've got manageable gaps in the out years, which we haven't had for a while.
Right.
So on the face of things, we seem to be in a strong position. I was very pleased that the mayor a year ago recognized what we had suggested, which is that labor contracts had to be negotiated to get a full picture of what our New York economy and our liabilities were going to look like. And he's now negotiated 71% of those labor contracts. And I think that's very significant.
That was one of the big questions walking in.
This was the question about how we were going to handle those negotiations. Now, having a strong economy helps, but also having good negotiating partners was helpful as well. Now, we can't rest here.
No.
Because there are some troubling signs down the road.
Talk.
We have an expanded, we have more jobs being created, but they're low-wage jobs. So these are the jobs that people have that they can't pay the rent or put food on the table. We have a tremendous housing crisis. So the entrance fee to our city is a $1 or $2 million condo. That's not sustainable. We need to create what has the makings of the next upwardly mobile next economy. So what is that? I think it's high tech. We have to build a high tech economy that's real in all 5 boroughs. Young people are working, thinking, and doing things differently than our generation, and we have to give them the tools they need. You know that in your classroom.
I know it just by living.
So you see it everywhere.
Right.
So today, our kids want to work together around a table on a laptop, inventing, creating. This high-tech economy has come here, but we need to create more shared office space. We need to expand the reach of broadband.
Right.
All of these issues will determine whether we're a city that's going to be competitive over the next 20 years. And part of what I want my office to be about is not just looking at this year's budget or a 4-year financial plan, but you're going to hear a lot from me about where our economy is going to be 10, 20 years from now.
And you certainly produce it. I mean, your website is excellent, and the various budget reports are really quite professional, which is, not to praise you too much, but was a hallmark of your work as borough president as well.
And this is where the office can play a critical role, working with the mayor and our partners in government, because we have the opportunity through our economists, through our budget expertise, to really look at different segments of our economy, take a look at what has to grow, what has to be managed more carefully. And that is a part of the office that in the past had not gotten a lot of attention, but I think we're going to spend more time on that now. Now, we're also the auditor-in-chief, so part of my job is to root out waste and fraud and to hold city agencies accountable, and as you know, we're doing that in a lot of different ways.
Okay. Your relationship to the mayor, the Wall Street Journal reported in its headline, "Rift grows between de Blasio and New York City Comptroller." It hasn't been exactly conflictual, but that's part of your job. Institutionally, that's what the controller's supposed to do. Who's he looking at or she looking at? Come on.
Look, I said this at the outset of the campaign. I didn't know who was going to be elected mayor, but the reality is the controller is the auditor-in-chief. You have to hold those mayoral agencies accountable. We have to blow the whistle when we find thousands of missing computers in the Department of Education, or when we hold the mayor's office to a rigorous accounting process.
Well, that was in the first month of the administration.
But this is all the work that I'm supposed to do. But there's also another side of this.
Go ahead.
You actually have to collaborate with City Hall and work with the mayor. And we've had our successes with Mayor de Blasio. We were able to put more certified arts teachers in the public school because we issued a report talking about the lack of arts teachers in Brooklyn and the Bronx, some of our poorest communities. The city council appropriated money for those teachers, and then the mayor sat down with us and said, let's get to work, let's make this happen. And so that's collaborative government. So I have a very unique role. On the one hand, I got to be a collaborator, right? We go to the rating agencies together. I testify on the budget to our state folks in Albany, and then at the same time I have to be the auditor-in-chief. So it's obviously a complicated relationship, but by any measure I think we've balanced working with the administration, but also calling issues out when we see it.
Okay. Let's move now from, I guess, City Hall to the State House. Your office, pardon me, released a study in January called Less Than Our Fair Share. Now, this is a blood pressure rising read for those of us who are interested in the city. Talk about how we are mistreated by Albany.
Over the years, we estimate that we've lost something like $10 billion in aid that should have come to New York City. It's really incredible. When I was in the Assembly, it started back in 2000 when we lost the commuter tax. We've lost that something like billions of dollars alone that we should have been getting.
Sort of an self-inflicted wound.
Totally, and I voted against it back then, and I bemoan the loss of that money now. But in other, in aid to locality money, we've been cut off by the state. It's unbelievable. We've been left alone, and that's just not right. Now, what's amazing about New York City, we are so strong, we are so resilient, that we've actually done well in so many areas.
Despite the fact that Albany's using us as a piggy bank.
The money flows in to help the rest of the state, and we don't get it back. And what I'm saying with this report this year,
go ahead.
We have a $5 billion surplus in just settlement money alone, thanks to the Attorney General. Budget projections for the state are going to show a surplus. And we in New York City must fight for our children, for the people that we represent. Look, we have record homelessness now. Over 60,000 people are homeless, sitting in our shelters. 25,000 of those are children. If you look at the deep freeze that we were in, you can see the people languishing on the streets next to $100 million luxury apartments. There's something wrong with that. And we're going to need some resources in order to make it right. And the better New York City does economically, it's a fact. New York State does better. We have an incredible multiple impact. We're a great multiplier for the rest of the state, and we should just recognize it and not be shy about it, because you can make the argument to our brothers and sisters around the state that investing in New York City is good for everybody.
Yeah, but you know that it's viewed as a zero-sum game, and whatever you give to the Sharks downstate doesn't go upstate. Isn't there a divide here geographically and attitudinally upstate now, or am I imagining
my
this?
My sense is that it is okay today for everyone to do well. So what I'm saying in my report is not that we should have more than our share.
Right.
But we should have something.
Right.
I mean, just give us what we need to continue to expand our economy.
And you're at least mildly optimistic that this is possible?
Well, I've having served for 13 years in the Assembly, dreams die hard on the last day of the budget. So, no, am I optimistic? I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going with the mayor to Albany. We're going to testify before the Assembly and Senate hearing, Ways and Means hearing. I'm going to outline some of the issues that we're going to identify in terms of fair share. We're going to talk about the need for strong rent laws to make sure that people have an opportunity to live in the city that they built. And that's what this is all about. So we basically have very simple goals here. We want people to keep coming here, because that's what has been great about New York, the fact that we are so diverse, we speak so many languages from different countries. It fuels our economy, but we don't want people to feel they can't come here because they can't afford to live here. The second thing we have to do is raise the minimum wage. We have too many people who can't put food on the table for their kids and pay the rent. That is absolutely unacceptable. But the third and most important piece of this is that we need to create the next economy, because we can never stop being the aspirational city that gets you to the middle class. So in a different generation, you remember the people push carts down 7th Avenue in the Garment Center? Well, when they were pushing those carts,
Wait a minute, I seem to remember this.
Okay, you probably were there. But pushing those carts was about also buying the business, buying the building, then another building, and rising to the middle class. I want our kids to have that same middle class hope and aspiration. And you know what? The high-tech economy gives you that. An entry-level programmer or coder job pays $60,000 with some education and training. Let's grab this economy. We've already surpassed Boston. We're rivaling Silicon Valley. This is going to be the transformational economy for New York if we don't blow it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, as business and finance, Wall Street, begins to shrink, at least in terms of jobs and the ensuing tax revenues, there's got to be a sector, but too many eggs in that basket as well. What else is there that could provide this engine of upward mobility?
Well, I'm not going to minimize it. Wall Street is still critical for our economy.
Oh, yeah.
And most of those big industries. But let's also be a little forward-thinking. We have to look at what's coming next. So high-tech is certainly coming next. But also, we now know that the small businesses in our city are the first job you get.
Yep.
The opportunity.
Yep.
So if you raise the minimum wage and then you reduce the burden the city puts on these small businesses, get away with these fines and fees and harassment that goes on.
And these arcane regulations.
And we have a red tape commission that I formed to look at these issues this year so that we can begin to figure out ways to reduce burdensome regulation, taxes, fees, and create a real opportunity for a city that will raise the minimum wage, but it won't be at the expense of the small businesses because we're going to reduce their exposure to other burdens that they face.
Okay. You delivered a quite noted speech at the Association for a Better New York in January, and you laid out, if you will, Scott Stringer's agenda and a couple of new initiatives. What do you've got on the burner right now? What is your office looking at, and what can we expect to see in the next couple of months?
Well, we accomplished a lot in the first year, and I really believe we've transformed this office. We've made it more nimble. We've looked at issues differently, whether it's claims or settlements of some big cases. So we have definitely moved fast in the first year.
Yeah.
This year, my goal is to focus on pension reform and alignment. We wanted to work with the trustees. We have 58 trustees of our 5 pension funds. Clearly, we can reform this process to make our investments quicker and more nimble. I'm going to work on those issues.
Talk about that. Go a little bit deeper as in your role as a trustee to the various pension funds and where we are with those pension funds and what these reforms would actually specifically do.
Listen, we're looking at ways to add value to the companies we invest. We're the only pension system in the world that has 5 separate boards doing the same 5 things every month. So there's a lot of burden as it relates to going through the investments over and over and over again in a month. 92% of the investments are the same with the 5 pension funds. So I've been talking to trustees about ways to reduce the bureaucracy and give us an opportunity to grow the fund by reducing the bureaucracy that we face every month.
Do we consolidate them? Is it legal? Does it make sense from a fiduciary point of view?
We're looking at many different options. We've been having these discussions for the last many months. I'm hoping that we'll put pen to paper in the near future. This is obviously very complicated because the system is run like this for decades, and with great success, with great smart trustees from our different from the different labor unions that represent the pension fund. And now we're sitting and having that conversation. I'm not moving it quicker to appease an agenda of mine. This is a conversation I'm going to have with the mayor and with our trustees, and we'll come up with something when we think we're ready to when we have a consensus.
We're making money?
Last year we returned 17%, but it doesn't mean that we're going to do the same this year because we're long-term investors.
17%.
It was a good year for everybody, but
that's pretty good.
But it was good because you can't. But by the way, you also have to look at hitting our actuarial target, not just in the short run, but over a long period of time. So you can't really look at our pension system and say, "Wow, that was a great year." Let's look at things over the long term. Make sure we hit that target because my responsibility, the most important responsibility I have as controller, is not these reports. It's not the audits. It's actually to protect the retirement security of 700,000 people.
Wow.
And I take that responsibility very seriously.
And one of the elements of the sort of a forward-looking approach to bonds and pensions is your green bond program for New York City. Discuss this a bit, what this means in terms of operations, but what it means in terms of the city and its folks.
Well, when we issue bonds, we do that because we want to pay for school construction and capital expense. I'm very proud to tell you that with the mayor's office over the last year, we've refinanced a lot of our debt. We've saved the city over $1 billion, but we also have to look at what investors are attracted to.
Yep.
One of the things that we're hearing from the investment community is they would like to have a green bond option because a lot of companies want to invest green. I think that's good for the city to earmark a bond offering for targeted investments for the green economy.
Okay.
And so we are working with OMB based on our report to try to get a consensus with them to actually have that offering at some point. And there have been discussions between my office and OMB, and we're hoping to push that along this year.
Good. One of the things that your office has been very active doing is the settlements based on wrongful convictions, whether it's the Central Park 5, the Rikers wrongful death, the Brooklyn DA's wrongful convictions with the Scarcella. Talk about these settlements and why they are important.
The controller has a role in pre-litigation settlements. We settle claims with the city. We settle claims with people who sue the city all the time. But we're also paying out a huge amount of money because we keep getting sued for the same thing over and over again. So in the beginning of the year, we instituted something called ClaimStat, modeled after CompStat, where we're looking to see where claims are coming from so we can change a procedure or policy so we don't get sued. Right now, we budget over $700 million.
And we spend it.
And we spend it, and we set it aside, and everyone, when I got elected controller, everyone was like, yeah, that's the cost of doing business. Well, we said no. One of the breakthroughs we had was we're now working with Commissioner Bratton. So when we get a claim, it goes to the commissioner, so he can do his own analysis to try to stop.
So there wasn't this communication prior?
This is unbelievable. This is the first time the police department has ever worked with the city controller's office. It's great, and he gets great credit for saying, yeah, we'll certainly work with you.
Absolutely.
And they're helping us with information we need. So if we have to settle a claim pre-litigation, so we do this in the best interests of the taxpayers, this is something that's very important. And look, some of these are very painful. This case we settled, the Murdo case, where a young man who was basically in prison for nothing wrong, at Rikers, for doing nothing wrong except being a homeless person, a former veteran. He died in his prison cell. It was 104 degrees. His mother found out about his death a month later, not from the city, but from a reporter. And there has to be, we have to make her whole. And we do that by balancing also the risk to the city if this case were to move forward. So I'm very proud of the work we're doing in all of these areas. You know, you don't do this kind of work this quickly without some controversy, but I think that's good because I like when people think about issues and, you know, we have that give and take.
Yep.
And that's the relationship we've had with the mayor and hopefully with the public as well.
But you've got a big one coming up, and that's the potential Garner suit. That's
I don't talk about the one.
No, I know. But it's out there, and you're going to have to grapple with it. So that's sitting out there. Talk about the other thing that fascinated me was your boardroom accountability project and your corporate governance, because Tom DiNapoli, who's a frequent guest here, this has been one of his causes as well. Talk about the project.
Part of what we do in my role as chief fiduciary, as the controller, is make sure that the companies we invest in will continue to create value. And part of that is looking at, does this company have a diverse board? Is there too much is there excess CEO pay going to the chairman, not thinking about the rest of the share owners? Making sure that we have a whole host of positions in place that protect our investments. And so one of the glaring, I think, inequities in this corporate structure system is that share owners can't run directors on these corporations. Boss Tweed never had it so good. So even after Enron and WorldCom, where people said we need independent directors, it's still, a golf buddy, it's still a golf
social
buddy
clubs.
System. So we, in my office, have now issued 75 proxy resolutions that will be voted on in the spring, challenging companies to open up their process to allow for direct election of directors. So if you have 3% ownership in a company for 3 years, you should have the right to initiate a campaign to be on the board. Right now, the ballot, if you ever saw a ballot, it's really true. I'm
part of the non-owning class.
Well, it's what the directors, you have one name on the ballot and no way to get on the corporate ballot.
This sounds like the former Soviet
This is
Union.
worse. This is worse. And so we're doing it differently. Rather than do this piecemeal, we've organized a national coalition with other large pension funds, CalPERS and CalSTRS and treasurers and controllers around the country.
That's some big money.
We've got some big folks involved, and we're starting to win. We're starting to see companies like GE recognize that fair is fair. They now support our effort, and you're going to see more of these battles in the spring. But this is very important for our pension fund to increase value. Independent organizations that look at these issues say that you could increase the value of U.S. companies by $140 billion if there was proxy access. That's according to the very well-respected CFA. So there's real reason to do this.
Wow.
And that's something that we'll wage this. We're going to wage this campaign company by company. The SEC could issue a rule to take care of this. They haven't done it yet, but we're going to try to pressure them.
Good. Last thing I want to talk about is one of my, sort of policy wonky areas, like yourself.
Okay, let's go.
And that's NYCHA, and NYCHA's inability to go on the money that's owed them and the ability to expend it in a timely, effective way. Talk about the problems of NYCHA and what you see from your vantage point of what we can do.
Well, since the day I got elected controller, we have been actively auditing NYCHA because I want to make sure that this very important housing stock and the people who live there are at the top of the progressive agenda in this city. And that's why we called NYCHA out for leaving $700 million in money that they could have gotten on, that they could have gotten left on the table. It's unbelievable. Hiring NYCHA residents, the Section 3 audit we did, which just shows tremendous amount of problems and numbers game playing that's going on there.
And none of this is new.
Well, this has been going on for a generation. I've been working on these issues when I was a state assemblyman 15, 20 years ago.
Sure.
So we're on it. Now, I think we're pressuring NYCHA and others to come up with a real plan. And I'm going to continue to audit. We have many audits still going on in NYCHA. But this is critical if we're going to talk about income inequality, if we're going to talk about how to help the poorest people in the city, we must change NYCHA. Now, I have to tell you, I'm shocked about something. You do an audit, right? So we audited DOE. And we said, look, we are missing thousands of computers. You don't have an inventory control here. DOE said, okay, we'll have an inventory control. Now, we'll look at that in a year or two, but they clearly recognize there was a problem. NYCHA is the only agency we audit where they don't admit anything. They don't realize there's a problem. So if you don't realize there's a problem, how are you going to fix it?
Okay. So we've got 20 seconds. How do you fix it?
You do a couple things. First of all, you clean up the mess in a real way. You put people in charge who can access this money. You create a funding stream. I have a proposal. I'll come back on the show and share it with you.
Good.
Taking Battery Park City money, earmarking it to NYCHA. It's one way of doing it.
Yep.
The mayor's actually had some very other smart ideas as well. But you create a holistic approach to this, and that you don't put aside the issues. Just own it. There's too much mold. The place is in disrepair. The lighting that we talked about, especially that became very famous, unfortunately, for the wrong reason.
Right.
Lighting in stairwells. There was money for that, and you left it on the table. Own up to it.
You're
Put
ticked
people
off.
in place.
Okay.
Well, because it doesn't have to be like this.
Okay. My thanks to New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer for being on the show. Join me next week when my guest will be Phil Cly, author of the National Book Award winning collection of short stories, Redeployment, here on CUNY TV. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.